Group 6 Podcast. Conspiracies, mysteries, cover-ups, cryptids. We talk about anything and everything, as long as it's interesting. For more info, any questions, or if you have some spicy info for us to talk about, contact us at group6show@hotmail.com. All right, another day, another Group 6 podcast. How
It
you
really
doing?
is Group 6 because we've got a guest today with us.
We have Zach, who is another student, not in the radio program, but a media student. So he gets to dabble in everything. And, well, Zach, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, you know, I'm glad to be here on the show. I hope to be here on future episodes.
Oh,
as well.
definitely.
I'm a young dad. You know, that's pretty much my life as far as things go. But I think probably most interesting is the topic that we're going to be talking about.
Yeah, now just before we start on the topic, I want to apologize for my extremely hoarse and weird sounding voice. I might sound different. I don't know. I think I'm a little sick. I don't know. I'm coming down with something, or either that or I worked too hard yesterday.
I'm sorry to hear that, fella. Do you need a hug?
He's a dad. He's good at giving
Here's
out
the
hugs.
hug. Here's the hug.
He's a dad to a guy who's slightly older than him. Anyway, so yeah, today we're just going to talk about some cults.
Well, you know, weird shit like that does happen in cults. David Koresh being one name that comes to mind. A couple other famous ones. You know, well, I mean, for the weird sex that usually happens in cults, Jonestown. I don't think there was any weird sex in Jonestown, was there?
No, it was a more religious based, and more faith based, and I think Jim Jones really fed on that.
One of those boring cults. I mean, as far as things are concerned, I mean, the interesting cults are the ones with the weird sex.
Oh yeah, and that's probably why he got them all to kill themselves with the Kool-Aid, because he's like, this is not memorable. I need to go down in history with something interesting.
You gotta have that Kool-Aid. Yeah. I mean, you know, that's if you're not gonna have weird sex, you gotta have the poison Kool-Aid.
Oh yeah,
for sure.
As far as things go,
the Kool-Aid man jumps through the wall.
But yeah, and then you can't really even talk about. You can't really talk about cults without talking about of course, Charles Manson. Probably the
Manson family.
The Manson family. I mean, and I've seen all the interviews with him.
He literally said he was Jesus, didn't he?
Yeah, he literally said he was Jesus. I mean, the guy doesn't even look like Jesus.
I think they should
I know what Jesus looks like.
Jesus with a swastika tattoo on his forehead.
I think they should do a world convention where everyone who's ever claimed to be Jesus meets up. All with the egos the size of the moon. And
wouldn't David Icke be there? Because he did say he was the son of God once.
Does that count?
I don't know. That should count as a cult. I mean, reptilians. That's pretty weird. That's nuts.
Actually, I heard about this. This test they had. They brought I think it was 3. I can't remember exactly the details or if this was actually even true or not. It was just something we had talked about in my high school class. But we talked about there was this test, I think, in the UK, and they got 3 guys all claiming to be Jesus Christ, and they put them all 3 of them in a room together.
So they have done this.
Yeah, exactly. Like I said, I need to look it up again, see if it's actually happened or if it's been debunked. But they got all 3 of these guys, put them in a room together, and in the end, they convinced each other that none of them are Jesus Christ.
So that could be the cure to cults. Get cult leaders to sit in a room.
Get all the crazy people together.
You know who I think is Jesus Christ?
Who's Jesus Christ?
Keanu Reeves.
Keanu Reeves. He could pass. He could pass. I mean, the guy's definitely ageless.
Well, he's humble enough to maybe be Jesus, because I don't get the feeling that Jesus would go around broadcasting that he was the Son of God. You know, like if you're the Son of God, you don't need to be insecure about it.
I think he stated his message enough when he did The Matrix.
I think so.
Maybe that was him. Maybe he told the Wachowskis, we have to have some religious, imagery in here because I'm actually Jesus, guys. Whoa.
Well, that's why it was the one good movie that they did, because he probably rewrote the script.
Well, see, all three of them could have been great, but the thing that could have made them great is if they had capitalized on the end of Reloaded. And,
I know.
Made another layer of the Matrix. It would have been so much better.
Well, maybe there's rumors going around of a fourth Matrix. I think maybe the Wachowskis are toying with it. That'd be great.
That'd be the only movie of theirs that would get approved after Jupiter Ascending, from what I've heard. Although I'm curious to see it. I really am. I don't know.
I mean, just bring back some of the key players like Lawrence Fishburne, because afterwards in the Matrix Online, at least, he was still searching for Neo.
Does Lawrence Fishburne even still have a career after?
He's on Hannibal. Don't you watch Hannibal?
I have not. It's on my list to watch, but I'm behind. I haven't even finished Walking Dead season 5.
You know what? It really pulls you in. You gotta wait for it though. But Hannibal is a good show.
All right. Well, we're getting a little bit off topic.
Yeah, but
we tend to do that.
But
John and I tend to do that.
Oh, all the time. But getting back to cults, outer space, science fiction, all that stuff. In a lot of modern cults, that really is the focus of it. Or even some religions like Mormonism. It's like a space religion.
Scientology.
Well, exactly. I was about to say.
Scientology is the ultimate.
That's
one.
a cult. That's a cult based on a fictional author.
Yeah,
exactly.
Science fiction author.
Frightening, right?
Yeah.
That's all L. Ron Hubbard did was.
I think that
fiction.
Germany has the right idea about Scientology. They don't even recognize it as a religion.
I looked up some of it, and the DVDs that are required for you to be a Scientologist, they range from like $300 a piece to like over $1,000 for like the whole set. And this is like a set of like 20 DVDs.
Oh yeah.
You have to have in order to be a Scientologist.
Well, I mean, you got to know your stuff. And
can I go through that many DVDs in a lifetime?
Right.
I mean, I have things to do.
Yeah.
I mean, come on, right?
How do these Hollywood actors get into it, or do they get a free pass? Maybe.
Yeah,
they have busy schedules. How can they go through that many DVDs?
I've heard that they actually get different treatment. Like, the abuse that happens in Scientology doesn't happen to the celebrities.
So is it just a publicity thing then for them?
I'm assuming yes.
I mean for the Scientologists, because if they get celebrities to join their cause, then. Hey, more the merrier, right?
Well, publicity. I mean, the people who run them, they're a lot of them are crazy, but occasionally when you get a rational cult leader, that's when they take off, because they know their weaknesses and they know just how far they can push things. Scientology definitely knew just how far it could push things. L. Ron Hubbard was an expert in the law, and he even said this, like the law is great at harassing people. And, we can use it to intimidate others if they take us down. And he gave his followers steps of what to do. And he even says shit like, if it's possible, just ruin him utterly. Those were his words. It was an old-fashioned way of saying, take him, push him into the dirt, make him sit starving in the gutter, losing everything near and dear to him or her, and then just laugh. Now, he was an evil man. He was just like pure malevolence.
And people will follow this. That is probably the most frightening thing. I mean, everybody. It doesn't matter. I mean, you have people with thoughts like this are a dime a dozen, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's boring almost. But the fact that there are people who will follow people who have this ideal, there I find the truly crazy ones. The followers are the true crazy.
Yeah, the followers scare me a little more, because at least the leader knows that it's all shit. Mm-hmm. The followers think it's real.
But another thing that pops into mind, I mean, especially on this topic, is that everybody remembers the negative aspects of the cult, and even it springs to mind. Has there ever actually been a positive cult?
Well,
a cult that has a
you could
positive impact.
You could argue that would just be a religion. The only difference between a cult and a religion, as far as I'm concerned, is that a cult is harmful. And you could argue that religions are harmful too. But usually the founder is dead with religions. Usually there's no charismatic leader. There's the Pope. The Pope has limited power.
You know,
he can't do whatever he wants.
That can bring you back to Jonestown, really. I mean, that started out really... a really good outlook. I mean, they took all these people to live in South America, you know, to start anew and to show that we can all be self-sufficient. And they had Jim Jones, who seemed really charismatic, and then everything just turned dark because it was all, I don't know, ulterior motives and stuff like that. I mean, but the man was already on drugs and all that, and he was probably always a false idol. And then I guess his drugs really took a real swing in his health and all that. But the abuse that went on with those people, that's where the positivity ends. And then they always had the suicide pact, and they practiced it.
Yeah. That's not a well-known fact about it. Heaven's Gate, obviously, that was, you know, it's well known that was planned out. But Jonestown, he was aware. I don't know how explicit he was about saying that the poison was in the Kool-Aid. That might not have been made explicit, but he had already basically said, you know, the world isn't going to encroach on us, and we will end ourselves before something like that happens. I'll have to check that up, actually, probably just for legal reasons or, you know, whatever, in case anyone cares. Not that anyone cares about defaming a cult that's already killed all its members.
Yeah, just some fact check.
It was 1978, man.
1978, yeah.
Nobody's gonna come vilifying Jim Jones.
Well.
hey.
Nobody would have.
Even his son thinks he was scum. Like if you've ever seen any of the Jonestown documentaries, like Jonestown Paradise Lost.
Yeah.
His son was one of the survivors. His son made it out without, you know, killing himself or getting killed.
Oh, a lot of the members of the Hubbard family are big opponents of Scientology.
Really?
Yeah, like his own son was disowned, one of them. His great-grandson, not that he ever knew Elron, but he was a huge opponent of Scientology. Because, you know what, if you're not benefiting from it, what reason do you have to support it? If anything, you are going to make sure that everyone knows that you're not down with what your great-grandfather did.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, and I think it's shocking that so many people in Hollywood, you know, are you know, follow Scientology. I mean, and now it's questionable, like, how closely they follow the doctrine, or if it's just like a publicity thing, or, you know, or what.
They want to be seen as a special snowflake for joining.
Right.
Well,
exactly.
Do you know what? You know, there's a lot of clinical narcissism in Hollywood, or not clinical, but very close to it. Mm-hmm. And that is the cult leader's wet dream, basically. It's the same thing as the narcissist's wet dream, to be the center of the universe.
Exactly.
And to control everyone's life. And as much as I think that what we were saying earlier, I mean, I don't really want to. I mean, I do want to come back to that. I don't think that we should put too much blame on the followers, because as much as they do harm, most of the time people that join a cult do think it's true, or they can't escape. Hollywood celebrities are a bit of an exception because they have responsibility and they have power, so they do legitimize these things. So I would hold them to a bit of a higher standard than Joe or Jane Blow, who's sucked into one of these things and, you know, doesn't know any better. Because I've known personal people who have been sucked into cults, and I've been very closely connected with cult leaders that have been exposed on national TV and stuff like that. And I'm familiar with the vibe, and I'm familiar with the way that they operate. And I have nothing but contempt for them. But at the same time, you recognize that there are good in some of these souls that, you know, as much as they do harm,
right,
are very sincere in following the cults.
I find a lot of Satanists happen to be pretty nice people.
Well, not that we would know anyone.
Hey, what about LaVey?
Simon LaVey is a very interesting figure. I wish I knew more about him, but I think
you mean Anton Szandor LaVey.
Simon LaVey. No, he was a researcher in sexual orientation, wasn't he?
Let's not go there.
Yeah, that's another episode.
Anton LaVey.
Got to bring sex into it all the time. Anton LaVey, that's right. Well, I was thinking of him. Yeah, I wish I'd read.
That's really not. I don't know if you'd
him.
classify that as a cult. It's more of an alternative religion.
It's a philosophy, isn't it?
It's a bit of a. It's philosophy. It's philosophy.
It's like Satanism. Satanism. You can just. It's basically just another. It's basically just another name for egoism.
But it's not harmful egoism. Like, we're getting back to narcissism. That's harmful egoism. Satanism is basically, you should live for yourself, but do not trample on others. And don't be pretentious. And
Indulge.
Indulge. You know, and so it's basically about helping yourself rather than hurting others, based on what I've seen. Now, it could be that I haven't read enough about it.
Well, one is if it's in the teachings of LaVey, like they say every man is their own God. I mean, that's a really good philosophy.
We are, because we perceive the whole universe, don't we? We are the people who perceive the universe. As soon as we shut down, it's like the universe is gone to us.
That's why I tend to identify myself as LaVey. I did go through a phase where I was completely atheist, and then I was maybe on the fence agnostic. But I think just as far as philosophy goes, I like to follow the LaVey.
Yeah, well,
even
you know
just
what?
The structure of morals.
It's something that I think at least gets your mind thinking. And I've mentioned, I'm a huge religion junkie, basically. As much as there's a lot of bad that it's done, it's fascinating. And I look to different parts of, Hindu philosophy, Christian philosophy, and stuff like that, and I take what's interesting about it. And I try and leave aside what's harmful about it. The only big problem with religion is that people think that it's made by gods as opposed to, human beings. And that is exactly what gets us into trouble. Or made by the representatives of gods, which is basically what cult leaders usually are. It's
what happens. That's when that happens is when we start getting like Westboro and who follow the teachings, by the book.
Our friends,
but just getting it all
our good friends, the
wrong.
Westboro Baptist Church.
So many people were so happy when Fred Phelps died.
Yeah. I mean, it's never a good thing to be happy about like the death of a person, any person. I do identify as an atheist, but I still have a sense of spirituality, and there's no.
Me too.
There's no time when the death of a person is ever good. But when it's Fred Phelps, it's easy to make an exception.
The lack of harm that's being pumped into the world now is less, and you can be happy about that. But to celebrate someone's death, it's almost like you almost suspect that people like that just love that kind of shit, and they're looking for an excuse to let it out. The difference between the hero, and I admit, I have days where I'm like, these people that hurt the world, I just hate them. I wish they were dead. But you know what? What's the difference between that and a serial killer? The serial killer is doing it out of personal pleasure, a lack of morality. Somebody who actually acts on this and becomes a vigilante and actually goes killing people who admittedly might deserve to die, they're no different.
We really touched on that a few days ago.
We did, yeah. We
went on a whole spiel about the psychology of vigilantism and things like Hitler, and that's where the thing came in about the guy who shot the man who kidnapped and molested his kid in the airport. You might have seen that video. Have you?
I have not. I've heard of the story, but to be quite honest, I've been avoiding it as best I can.
See, now you're a dad, so coming from a person who actually is a parent, I'm kind of curious. Where do you fall on that mentality? Now, just say your boy was kidnapped by his karate teacher and possibly molested, and this guy is basically being carted around by the cops, and you have the opportunity to catch him at an airport and pop a .38 into his skull.
I like to think that I would be the bigger man, because I mean, for people like that, prison is worse.
Yeah,
prison
so
is
you would
worse.
In that case, like there's a solid case against him, so you'd let the courts, take their course. Right?
I mean, why do you think? I mean, without law and justice, what is our society? And we even if it is flawed, we have to.
Yeah.
As
I
a
was
people,
about to go.
we have to believe in that the system works,
I was
even
about to
if
go
it is
right there.
flawed.
Exactly.
I was definitely about to go right there with that because the justice system is definitely flawed. definitely. There are a lot of problems. There's lots of injustice. There's lots of ways the police could do things
But
better.
you don't throw something out just because, and we can't. We can't without starting a massive revolution that would do tons of harm.
Some of
And
it's broke. We can just fix
there
it. We
is
don't
no
have
will
to
do that.
We don't have to revolt yet. I mean, not saying that couldn't happen in the future. I mean, it's happened before. 200 years
Sure,
ago.
yeah.
I mean, in the USA, that's exactly what happened.
But as a definitive answer to your question, I would not take that chance, because I mean, while it is a sense of justice that everybody says, oh yeah, I would definitely do that, and everybody if that sort of thing happens, it takes every ounce of your.
How many times a day would
sure.
you watch Dateline, or you watch To Catch a Predator, or to hear about a pedophile or a murderer, or even the Russell Williams case, and say, "Oh, I'd love to kill that guy."
Yeah, we feel these things, but we're not idiots, and we don't act on them. And you know what?
We are bound by our
Anger
by
passes.
personal morality.
Exactly. Anger passes, and we have, different drives in us. We all have the drive to punish people that we see as harming people. We also have calmness, because that gives us the sense of cool-headedness to make decisions. And we have empathy and love, which is the very reason why we would be angry at people who hurt innocent people in the first place. And without that empathy and love, if it was just anger and just punishing, then there's no good in that. So it needs to be for a good reason. And in a lot of ways, the only reason why people are even angry against these criminals, pedophiles and stuff like that, is because, as far as I'm concerned, I never wish really much ill at all on people who can feel guilt, because the guilt is its own punishment. The only reason that I have any desire at the back of my mind to see these people punished is because it doesn't seem like they can feel guilt. And it's like, well, we need to put something in the place of guilt. If that's feeling bad you got caught, then it's feeling bad you got caught. And I would add, of course, murdering the person in cold blood, there's a little bit of pain, then it's gone. You don't have that 20-year stint in prison to say, oh my God, I wish I'd never done this and got caught, because they don't have empathy. Usually, I mean, I guess what Brian and I were saying, it's a pedophilia is, or child molestation, I should say, that's an act. A person could be a psychopath that does it, or they could not be a psychopath. They might just be attracted to kids and they lose it. And they've done something very evil, but they're still human. And there is a difference there.
And then there's the ones that are outspoken, that they don't act on it, of course. It's just a mental problem.
It is a mental problem, and it should always be treated as such.
The only problem is there's a long road ahead for any type of stigma.
It's frightening. It's frightening. I watched on YouTube the other day a very fascinating documentary that Louis Theroux, if you're familiar with his work, that Louis Theroux did, and he went to there's actually these homes for pedophiles to get over their fetish, and where they recognize what exactly is wrong with them.
Yes.
And it's very fascinating, because this one guy, he had himself chemically castrated.
Oh, many of them are willing to do that, and they want to do it.
And then later he had himself literally castrated, not just chemically.
Yeah.
Like he got, the full, the full hostile two going on.
Although I almost wonder, someone who would do that is someone who actually really does have a soul deep down and doesn't want his predilections, let's call them, to harm anyone. I almost get the feeling that, a pedophile that doesn't care wouldn't be the person to go out of the way, and they would be. If you go on psych forums, this is the place to see pedophiles talk. Out of all the places on the internet that I've ever seen, at least, reputable websites anyway, to listen to pedophiles talk about their own experiences, because they're not thrown off. And like you said, that stigma, like if you mention something like that to a therapist, the therapist needs to notify the police. Is one of about 3 things that will cause instant notification. The other 2 things are presumption of murder or serious bodily hurt to another, or suicide. Those are the only 2 other things that merit that kind of thing. So you have this building up inside oneself. It's no secret to me why pedophiles snap and why they act on their inclinations. There's no way to talk about it, and there's no way to say, I have a problem. and I want to fix it. I want to control it.
And you can't even come out with it. You can't even come out. The people like that, they can't come out with that problem without being automatically ostracized.
Yes.
And turned into this pariah, even if they're completely sorry and they disgusted by themselves.
Yeah. Well, I mean, look at the way that we've been talking. We've been using the word pedophile as if it meant child molester.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Society has ingrained that in our.
You got to put that in with, but really, some people use that term incorrectly when they should be using terms like epiphile or all that.
Oh, yeah. Ephebophile. I don't know if that's the pronunciation. Is like a 16-year-old or something like that, or a 15-year-old. So we call them creeps. That's what we call them. It's distinct from pedophilia because what it is an interest in mid-teenagers. Mm-hmm. Young teenagers, that's its own thing too, and it's separate from pedophilia. And it's really interesting because these sorts of things, while they might be similarly problematic, are not actually the same and might need separate treatments. Especially when we get into the science of what causes it, because I don't think there's been that much research on it.
No.
Really.
That was my cell phone.
Metal Gear Solid. Oh my God! Now video games. There's cults in video games. Anyway, I really wanted to in-chat something since we're on this particular topic. Some of these people want which is something I don't agree with. I think it should be recognized as a mental illness in particular. Some of these pedophiles want it to be more recognized as a sexual orientation.
Mm-hmm. Actually, I did do some looking on that, but it seems for the most part the people on there are the people who are proponents of that are actually just on the internet trolling around.
Yeah.
They're trying to rise up some.
Yeah.
And let's be fair. It's working. It's working. You should see some of the hate that gets thrown at them.
Because people lose their shit. I would say that, and we were saying this the other day, pedophilia is really the most hated sin. It's not murder. Why am I using the word sin? We're getting into this religious language. But, it's not murder, even though you could argue that murder is the ultimate sin because it takes a human life. And there are things that mess people up more than pedophilia. It depends on the person. Some people will get fucked up for life because they've been molested as a child. And some people, they'll be like, it was gross, but I got over it. It all depends on the person. Mm-hmm. Just as, like, some people will take a certain event and, like, September 11th, some people couldn't speak for months after September 11th happened. And some people were like, oh my God, this is sad, this is terrifying, but I'm still going to go about my day. And they weren't obviously unaffected, but they weren't shattered by it.
And then there's still people who are even people who weren't even in the towers, who didn't have family that were in the towers, are still so angry and hurt about it, and just taking the wrong scapegoat.
That's right.
As well.
Well, you know what? I think that is related to the cult psychology of us and them. We can almost have cults on a nationalist level.
Certainly.
The cult of nationalism, National Socialism.
The Nazis. They definitely, I would consider them a cult. While they're
their charismatic leader.
They're charismatic. You got a charismatic leader. Hateful doctrine, mm-hmm. which is within the realm of cults.
Yeah.
Fanatic followers. What else would constitutes a cult besides those main three things?
Definitely more so today when we have neo-Nazis and skinheads.
Exactly.
That's definitely. If you can't technically call the original Nazis a cult, you can call neo-Nazis a cult. They're worshiping Hitler and his teachings.
Most definitely.
Yeah. I knew someone who was raised in a KKK family, and was held at knife point by the Grand Wizard, as he pretentiously calls himself.
Grand Wizard.
Because he got drunk one day. And, there was, some family member who wasn't at the meeting or whatever it was, just, really unhinged, crazy people, needless to say, because they're driven by fear. There's no Hitler telling them what to do. They're just racist, and they feel powerless, and they want some way to strike back against society. So they're like, we're the white supremacists, and we have we want a homeland for ourselves, mm-hmm. and all that.
But I mean, they want that homeland for themselves when their ancestors took it from another race.
Well, you see, that's what I don't understand is that why in North America, if you were in Europe, you'd still be evil, but at least you would have a point. You would be like, this is our native land. North America is not the native land of Europeans. It's the native land of the natives. That's why they're called natives.
Go back to Norway.
Yeah, exactly.
That's where. I mean, if you're talking
if you want
about
to have
having
reserve for yourself in Norway, that's perfectly fine.
Yeah, right. And I mean, it's like, and then besides, I mean, we go back far enough. We were all black at one point.
We all were.
Yeah, but it's proven that was the first.
We were all African at one point. So would that not be where everybody's true homeland is? If we're going back far enough,
maybe some of these people are super religious.
If it's determined by ancestry,
I just love that because right there that really ends all of that for me, and I just really get embarrassed for my own race if they're racist against blacks.
Well, I'm not even like, I mean, white guilt has become a thing that's happened. I mean, if you ask me, it's stupid to feel guilty for the actions of a race stuff like whites. Whites are the first thing that come to mind. Of
even
course.
People involved in anti-racism say white guilt doesn't do any good. And it's a problem because only good people feel white guilt. The assholes who don't care about being racist and who do not care about correcting racial injustice in society are never going to feel white guilt because why would they? That's the thing. It's a harmful thing that's only felt by people who are trying to do good or who are, manipulated, because there's always going to be someone desperate. Mm-hmm. That doesn't mean that racism isn't a problem. It just means that there's always someone who's got a chip in their shoulder and says, well, you white people are genetically more evil than other people. But that's a minority of people anyway who say things like that.
But I mean, on the topic, I'd like to paraphrase the lyrics to a Minor Threat song. Mm-hmm. They wrote "Guilty of Being White" as a their own version of an apology. Their own version of an apology, whilst at the same time saying we don't need to apologize for something white people did years and years and years before we were even born. We had no part of that. Why should we keep apologizing for that? We've done enough apologizing. It's time for us to move on beyond that fact, and all of us together. Because if you keep, hatred begets hatred.
I see two sides to that. On the one side, the dominant thing in society right now is, well, there are still effects of racism. And, frankly, I would agree with that. I think that's hard to deny. There's still effects of racism, and it's that's being talked about, not the ancestral thing. But at the same time, there are probably individuals who are like, well, your ancestor did this, and blah, 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 and they've got a grudge. And that's obviously not good. Even if you understand why they would feel that way, you don't need to respect the fact because, again, you don't really have power over what your ancestors did. So I see both sides, really, to that. But the main point that I think people are trying to make now is that it's really not about the ancestors, if that makes any sense. Mm-hmm. And that is ironically racist in itself, if you get into that, because it's the idea that there's a magical inheritance that comes down parent to child. But that's culture that does that. That's not race. Race really has nothing to do with culture inherently. It's correlated with it because people who lived in a certain area had certain biological markers on them, and they happen to, because they lived in that area, share the same culture. Mm-hmm. But it's not causative. And that's another important point to keep in mind.
Because in the end, we are all individuals.
Exactly.
I mean, genes only
determine
so much.
There's more difference between individuals within a certain ethnic group than there are between ethnic groups.
I'd like to go back to Westboro Baptist Church for a moment. One of the daughters there, or granddaughters, I can't remember which. She actually escaped. And she wrote a book. I can't remember what her name is at the moment, but she actually got out of there fairly recently, and she wrote a book about it. And she describes that the most she knew what they were teaching was wrong. Right. She knew what they were teaching was wrong, and she got out of there. But the problem is that she still had all that learned behavior, and that was the hardest part she describes, was forgetting that learned behavior.
Exactly.
And stopping hating, even though she knows hatred is wrong.
Exactly. And that's the kind of racism that's in society today. It's not conscious racism. Well, it may be conscious, but it's not chosen. It's not intellectual. It's not, I think that people from Africa are lesser than white people.
To a degree, some of it is subconscious.
Yeah.
I mean, you're definitely right there.
Or it's the assumption, like getting into Ferguson and all that stuff. You don't need to hate anyone who happens to be black to do that. All you need to think is, oh, black person, night, more likely to be danger. That's all. That's all it takes.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a very different kind of racism than the racism of the Confederate States of America, who said in their cornerstone address, the reason why we are separating, that's why I always love it when Southern, and I love the South. I've been there many times. My cousins live there. I think it's a wonderful place in a lot of ways.
Beautiful. To Tennessee.
Yeah.
We were there.
We were there in Tennessee, high school. I should have mentioned, Zach and I went to high school together, and very great trip down to South Memphis,
Some of the
Nashville.
nicest people you'll ever actually meet.
Good music, good eating, good
true.
people.
They are more polite down there, and it's in a good way. I don't like how in Canada it's like, well, it's fake. You don't really know the person. Bullshit. I think politeness.
You don't know how nice anybody is until you come up to Canada. Eh?
Yeah.
I think it's funny though. I mean, you go just down the border. I mean, and you hit Detroit. You hit a place like Detroit, which is might as well be a war zone at this point. Might as well be a war zone. I mean, if you ever
Hey, we're getting into racism again.
Well, I mean, I'm not even. I mean, it's just like it's
No, it's true.
running.
They're shooting season 6 of The Walking Dead there. I'm kidding, but they could.
They could.
No, it looks like
this city looks awful.
Yeah,
and nobody
there's
cares.
nothing left. There's nothing left. Everything's rotting. People were selling houses for like $1,000. It was, or less than that sometimes. It's sad. Now they're turning to farming. The city is literally reverting back to country. That's what's happening.
I think it'd be very interesting.
That's a good recourse, I think.
I think it'd be very interesting. I hope to goodness that it works out. But I mean, you go just under the border, and you get I mean, no offense to no offense to any American listeners, but you get the tip a lot of the stereotypes of the asshole American, and then you go further south. And then suddenly everybody's polite again. Everybody's still surprised when you hold the door open for them.
Well, that's the weird thing. I mean, there's all this controversy about, is holding a door open for a woman rude? And I'm just like, well, in Canada, everyone holds the door open for everybody. Stop assuming that some American cultural norm is universal, It's really interesting, though. And
just be generous to everybody else.
Exactly. It doesn't matter whether they're a male or a female. Be nice and be generous, and people will like you. Nobody, other than some losers that are just like, you're too nice, you're a pushover, I disrespect you. Like, fuck people like that.
Come on,
fuck people like that. Seriously, you make the world a worse place, people like that.
I mean, it may sound like, something a hippie would say, but I mean, it really should be just, don't be an asshole to one another.
When John says fuck, you got to really obey.
Right. Yeah, well, I don't know. One of the few things that gets me angry, and I know it seems weird for me to say it because I've been angry sometimes on the show already, is the people that make being good something for suckers. I don't like it when people take people who are generous and altruistic and make that weak behavior. I hate that because I feel as if good should be the good thing. I think that it should be the most natural and beneficial thing to do, and we should set up society to encourage that so that everybody is generous and kind and open-minded and understanding with each other.
But to be fair, I mean that is the perfect example. But without there are some things that that society has taught us is inherently wrong, like ambition.
Well, no, ambition's not bad. I'm not saying ambition's bad or anything like that because without ambition we.
But I'm just saying the media.
Sure.
I mean, let's look at your typical movie premise. Let's look at the Avengers.
Yeah.
Or Thor.
Yes.
Or Thor. Thor would be a better example. Loki is evil because he's ambitious. He is ambitious. That is his defining trait.
Yeah.
Thor is good because he's ambitious, but he learns at the end of the movie to suppress his ambition.
Well, you would have no motivation to do anything if you were like that. And worse, and I really find this worse, it's hypocritical. Because don't tell me that the producers and the writers and the directors of that movie and the actors, don't tell me those people were not ambitious. They're in fucking Hollywood.
It seems this is all a product maybe of the economy we live in, the times. Because nobody has time for ambition anymore, unless it's for something that's going to be lucrative, and not a passion,
Right.
necessarily. I mean, some people get lucky; they become ambitious and successful in something they're passionate about. But these days, it's just about getting by, above all else, just because of how in the tank the economy is in North America. I mean, it reflects and it psychologically changes people. Like, baby boomers or parents that have grown up in the 60s are raising, people our age are really getting concerned about what's best for their kids. And they have ambitions in all different places. I mean, people like us, look where we're at. We're ambitious in things that may not be a sure thing.
Oh, sure. You don't get into radio because you think that it's like the 100%
money
certain...
and fame.
Yeah. No, well, I mean, even the most famous radio jocks, they're locally famous. So, I mean, if you were super, super ambitious, you probably wouldn't get into radio either. But it's like, it's a job that's not super easy to get, and it often has the lure of some kind of public presence.
Not super easy to get because it's super easy compared to other jobs that you're run of the mill minimum wage job. This is, there's worse jobs than sitting in a fucking studio all day.
That was my thought. If you can pay me to sit in a studio all day, I'll do that above flipping burgers.
Oh yeah. I'm going into television and new media.
And you're a writer. You're a writer too.
And I'm a writer too.
This seems to be the theme. Writers are so reviled by Joe working man. Or people with that chip on their shoulder. Whereas, why are you writing? Why don't you do something else instead of writing all day?
Whereas, to be honest, I mean, I know that this is the opinion I share with filmmaker Kevin Smith. He's gone on record talking about how he says he's guilty for being he feels guilty for being a filmmaker, the easiest, stupidest, most fun job you can possibly have, and he's literally contributing nothing to society. The guy feels guilty for this, and I'd be lying if I said that I wouldn't be feeling the same way. I mean, because there is a certain honor in doing the blue collar work working with your hands. There's the jobs that nobody should have to do, but still have to do.
I really think with that point, I think Kevin Smith is kind of downplaying himself a little.
A little, yeah.
Well, he is.
Just as a celebrity himself, he's got his fans. Surely that does something for them.
I mean, all my favorite artists and celebrities, I wouldn't want them to retire because they bring me joy.
Exactly. I feel, and while I do still agree with them, there is a purpose to it.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's just look at even the Dark Ages. Even the Dark Ages needed jesters.
Yeah, sure.
Exactly.
Although back then that wasn't a cushy job. Entertainers, your head would be cut off. if you weren't entertaining enough.
It's a bit
I'm not laughing. Send him to the guillotine.
It's better to be a bard in a fantasy.
It's like Joffrey, after his supposed father dies, and there's that bard playing the song. And that was probably a daily occurrence back in the Middle Ages.
It's fairly truthful. This thought actually just occurred to me, going even further back. I'm jumping all over the place right now, but we're going back to when we were talking about Detroit there, and when we were talking about Detroit there, I'm also thinking back to the positive impacts of gangs or cults. But could we also think of street gangs as a sort of cult?
That's a good question. It's. I almost think of a mafia, and street gang. I almost see that on the same level as a mafia, sort of, and it's different from a cult. It has a different kind of appeal. It definitely has that small tribal appeal that a cult has. Like, we are the best. We are the small select few, and we will triumph over everybody else. It has that aspect to it, but with a cult, it's about mind control. With the street gang, it's about allegiance. And I think there's a difference. And that's what I hate really most about cults. And it's not like there's not a lot to hate about them. It's the mind control.
Mind control.
Oh, Jesse.
Taking over.
Well, it limits the imagination. And as soon as you limit the imagination, you limit your ability to get out. You limit your ability to do anything, because imagination is the one tool that's useful in practically everything that you do.
No, it's true. It's true.
And any social movement, even with a good end in mind, that limits your imagination isn't doing it properly, if they really mean it. If I am trying to accomplish something, I always try and say, I could be wrong. Question me. Say that I'm a terrible representative for what I am spouting. Because if I'm not doing my job properly, then I want to be called out on it, because I'm endangering my own cause. And it should always be about principles. That's the thing. I think it should be about principles and not about rules. Although any political movement has to take rules into account if it wants to get anywhere. And that's the issue, I think, with a lot of religious organizations. They need to get some kind of orthodoxy, or else they don't, like, look at Protestantism. It doesn't hold together as a religion. It's the same thing with cults. It's the same thing with political parties, street gangs. It doesn't matter what it is. Any kind of movement, it has the political need for those rules, but those rules are still poisonous. They never stop being poisonous. They're just useful.
Definitely, I can see that. I can definitely see that. I mean, like, there's a lot of. I mean, let's be fair. The Catholic Church is getting better. They're moving in the right direction.
Sure.
We'll be fair.
And yes, they have to, but who cares?
They have to.
Yeah.
Exactly. But still, a step in the right direction is still a step in the right direction.
Exactly.
Regardless of the outlying factors that are required.
Yeah, that's why I don't like it when people call the Catholic Church a cult, even though I totally understand why they're doing it. And I totally understand the religion and cult line is very, very thin. But a cult has a different purpose. A cult is almost cynical. It creates itself for the sake of ambition, for the sake of fame, or even just for the sake of money. I don't think the Catholic Church is out there to get money. I think there are people in it that use it and exploit it for money. I think it's filling a religious need. Even if you're one of those people that think religion offers nothing to the world, you can't deny that in a lot of human beings' hearts, they reach out to it and it means something psychologically to them, particularly when they're in times of trouble. Religion, it's not just, I'll go somewhere after I die. It's the idea that I have a purpose for life and there's something spiritual that binds me together with other people. It's something to believe in and something to do, something that is not limited to one aspect of your life, but it speaks to all aspects, and that can, take your whole personality together. I don't know. I feel like some days, like, I'm totally in favor of all of the people that point out the cynical and the dangerous parts of religion, and other days I almost, like, I have an admiration. I definitely have a kind of an awe of religion, but on other days I have an admiration for it and even love it, because I'll tell you, when I go to Mass, I have a spiritual experience there that is so great that if I did not have the education that I had, I would assume that it was the Holy Spirit. It's only my rational brain that says, well, maybe it's something else. Maybe it's something else. I told this to a therapist once, and I don't know if I guess I can say what I did in therapy. I know that they signed those forms. I think he was religious or something, and he was like, well, why don't you go back, get into the church again, and maybe find some truth? And it's like, I don't know, because I don't think I could make myself believe in it. It's like we've got split brains. I think a lot of people in churches, they've got split brains. It's not so much that they're not drawn to it. A lot of people understand what the appeal of religion is. They just can't believe in the facts, the fake facts.
I mean, I'm almost jealous to have of people in religion, because I definitely understand. I mean, it's a search for answers when you. I mean, it depends on what you discover first.
Yeah.
Do you discover, in most cases, I assume. I mean, I was born and raised as an atheist, but that doesn't mean that I don't refute so many of the greatest scientific discoveries were discovered in the name of Jesus Christ.
Like Big Bang,
The Big Bang was discovered
because he was like, well, I'm Catholic and I'm assuming that the universe has a beginning. Now it might not have. It just happened that the universe had a beginning, but you never know. I find it interesting that you were raised atheist, but yet understand the pull of religion. That's really interesting. It lends personal support to my theory, anyway, that it's almost like a biological thing.
I think one must realize the pull of religion so that they can have their own choice. I mean, so you hear of so many people who are just indoctrinated into it, or they're raised to it from birth because that's how they're supposed to be according to the family.
Oh yeah, and I was in a way that hurt me, because my father, although he was well-intentioned when he did it, he was absolutely well-intentioned, there were things that he didn't let us watch and read which were kind of stupid, and worse than that, you know, kind of thought patterns that through exposing us to fundamentalist religion, we were encouraged to limit in ourselves. And that's, to this very day, what I dislike about it. I remember, and not everyone responds to it this way, but, you know, at one point when I took it a bit more seriously, and I had to grow into taking it seriously, when I was 5 or 6, believe it or not, then I intuitively recognized its limitations, but yet still found power and interest in it. And then when I was about, 10, I was like, well, I would, make up mythologies and stories and gods and stuff like that, just because I'd read my big book of Greek myths, and, I was inspired by that. When I was 6 years old, I would even make up Bible stories. I would write fake Bible stories. Well, I mean, the stories had to get there somehow,
Right.
But
right.
there's this thing where, you tell yourself, well, God wouldn't like me doing that. And that's the part that I dislike, the idea of God as someone telling you not to do something, rather than an experience that uplifts you and gets you to ask questions and expand your own sense of feeling and spirituality to the universe, is like, no, this is this. And I get why people do it. They want to be safe and they want to know how to live their life, but it's harmful.
That really strikes me as something profound, because I remember distinctly, a lot of people in my family are religious. My dad once said, well, I don't go to church because if there's a God, I don't think he'd want me pretending to be something I'm not, which is a churchgoer. I follow that. I mean, am I strictly religious? No, but if there happens to be a God out there, I'm sure he'd want us to experience life our way.
Well, exactly, and I do agree, and that was why I was really surprised when that therapist was like, "Oh, go back to church anyway." It's like, are you saying you want me to be insincere?
There has to be more misconceptions in there that people are taking from even just Christianity, because a lot of people have that. Like, for instance, homosexuality. A lot of people are still, drilling that stupid notion that homosexuality is a sin when that was never ever stated.
Well, I think in terms of homophobia, I mean, there's there's no reason to hate gays, gays, or even like the idea of homosexuality. I mean, but the especially if you're stating, oh, it's because of religious reasons, the Bible says it's wrong. Well, no, it doesn't. It never says it. It never once says it's wrong.
Well,
but except for in I think Paul.
Yes.
But Paul
Jesus doesn't say that it's wrong.
No.
It's mentioned in the Bible
what did
sparsely, very few times, but all of those times are condemning. And Paul says that basically it's a punishment for worshiping idols. Now, there's other ways you can interpret that Greek word. Some people think that it's specifically a reference to temple prostitution. And no doubt in my mind, that was why it was condemned, because it's like, oh, it's all associated. Because they very much thought that way back then. Some people still do. It's like, ooh, drinking leads to this, and this leads to this. It's all evil. And so that's probably why it was stigmatized. But you know what? On top of that, there definitely is the sense that Paul is condemning homosexuality, and he sees it as like a depraved state that you fall into when you reject God, or when you start worshiping idols, is the way that he puts it. And that's the negative aspect of religion, is that worship this God and not this God, and see spirituality in this way and not this way.
Yeah.
And that's responsible not only for those prohibitions, but responsible for a lot of the problems between religions.
I mean, and like that's why I mean with hating homosexuality because of religion.
Yeah.
It's flawed. It's a flawed reason, because there's so many, the Bible contradicts itself a lot, which happens through translation and so many different things. I mean, it's exactly why who had their hands on writing translations of the Bible.
Well, it was monks, and they couldn't.
White monks who hated
They
everything
weren't
that
all
wasn't
white.
them.
They weren't all white, because North Africa was Christian.
Oh,
before,
that's right.
And was actually Egypt, even after the Muslim conquest, was Christian for a long time, and there's still lots of Christians there. So, but yeah, it was kind of Mediterranean cultured monks, often couldn't read, copying stories. And one story that was in the margins once about a woman who was caught in adultery, as they used to say back then, and they were going to stone her. And then Jesus said, "Let he who has not sinned cast the first stone." This was a story that someone had written in the margins, and a monk thought it was part of the Bible. So he copied it down.
Exactly.
And the story ended up in there.
That alone, let he who is without sin cast the first stone. I mean, that is always a universal tome. I mean,
that's pretty good for an add-on, though.
It's pretty much means, what I got from it was, we all make mistakes, we learn from them. So why should we shun anybody else?
Mm-hmm. Well, you see, that's the thing, and we've all got different conceptions of morality. And I'm not saying I approve of the morality that condemns homosexuality or something like that, but I try and be, in our culture anyway, patient with people like that because I understand that they really, really believe in it. I just want them to know that, what they're doing is hurting. It's hurting other people. And, as you point out, it's not all caused by religion. It is a cultural thing. And a lot of atheists have homophobic thoughts and feelings. Mostly feelings. That's really what it's all based on. They just do because they were raised to feel insecure about it. Whereas in other cultures and in other times, it was perfectly accepted. And
yeah. I mean, you go into a Roman bathhouse and
oh yeah,
all the time.
Well, didn't they have arguments? And I mean, a lot more of it was age based back then. It wasn't like adult man to adult man, which actually was illegal in some places in ancient Greece. But in some other places, if the boy that's weird, where it was actually borderline pedophilia was better than adult homosexuality, which is fucked,
just out there these days.
But again, it's like every culture has its own morality, and I'm not saying that's a good morality. I'm just saying they had their own morality, and back then Plato had a dialogue. Well, which is better, sex with women or sex with young men? Mm-hmm. And this remained a debate even after Christianity came. The Bible is full of all these obscure little things. People didn't pay that much attention to the homosexual prohibition. The church didn't like it. They didn't smile on it. But it really wasn't until the later Middle Ages when they started to go really hardcore against it. And, up till then, there were probably a lot of people who practiced it semi-openly, unaware that it was even condemned by the Bible.
Right.
I mean, I don't know that. I mean, I'm not an expert in the subject, but I do know that it was way less stigmatized in early medieval Europe.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, I mean, if you ask me, I mean, going back to like reasons for homophobia, yeah, you can think, if you ask me, you can think that homosexuality, you can say, oh, I don't like it because it's icky. You can say that. At least,
I don't like cucumbers. They're not evil.
Yeah, right, exactly. I don't like them, but that doesn't mean that it's wrong. You can just say, I don't like it, but
have at it.
I'm not going. Go ahead, have at her.
Exactly. Like, why that should be the norm,
Mm-hmm. Do what you're gonna do.
Do what you're gonna do. It's a lot like religion. Do what you're gonna do. Don't shove it down other people's throats if they don't want it. I mean, a lot of people are accepting. I'm accepting. We're all accepting, or else we wouldn't be talking about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, otherwise, we'd be avoiding the subject if we weren't accepting.
Yeah, we don't want to.
Well, because it's something to be embarrassed of.
We don't want to bash people on a podcast that we're going to be putting out there. I mean, no, we're sincerely,
Mm-hmm.
We're genuinely for the equality.
And and kind of confused at why. I guess it's because, for me, I don't understand why someone would find it so disgusting. But do you know what? There's so many reasons, I think. Like, some people, for male homosexuality, they see it as, demeaning to manhood. It's like, oh, well, especially if you're the receptive partner. And so much of that plays into it. It's like, oh, well, I feel weird, or I feel like, and they wouldn't even let a woman, back finger him up in the eye. I'm not saying that it is my cup of tea to have someone, stick their finger up my ass. But
got something you want to tell us?
but like, if it were, I don't think that anyone would have the right to judge me for it, and I don't think that anyone else has the right to judge anyone for it. Because
judge not lest ye be judged.
Very well said.
It's the same thing with let he was with who else with Yeah, whatever. You know what I'm going for.
Right.
You know what I'm going for. It's just, why... I don't see gays judging straights. I mean...
Well, I mean,
That is
gays
actually,
are,
but that is actually a movement that's happening on the internet. I mean, there's straight hatred going around. Hatred towards, I think the term is like cis, like SCIS.
Oh, that cis is different, but
So let me get this straight.
My understanding of cis is that you identify as the gender you're born with.
yes, that's right. Gays are a minority. Trans folk are a minority, and I think that for that reason, it's unlikely that that's going to have the same power as, say, and I know that a lot of people argue that it isn't racism when a person of color hates on a white person. I would argue yes, but it means less because white people are dominant. I think people should be a bit more honest about that and say the word racism to most people just means you don't like someone of a certain race. It doesn't mean institutional racism per se. But I totally recognize their point. But I recognize their point far more so when it comes to gay people, because gay people are probably always going to be a minority, whereas race, it fluctuates, and in certain parts of the world, it's not beneficial to be white as much as it is beneficial to be, say, Asian, say in Japan or something like that, where racism, the institution is different there from a descriptive point of view. I'd love someone to debate me on this because I really want to be right. Whenever I get into conversations like this, it's like I really do not want to be racist, and you've probably already noticed I make a huge effort in not being. So whenever I say something like this, if I am wrong and I am objectively wrong, please point me out. Because I just want to describe the world as it is. And in different parts of the world, you do see racism working in different ways, such as in Zimbabwe, where you have the white people who are kicked off their farms. Now, those white people belong to a culture that was very hating and that created a great deal of discord and strife and oppression.
We're going back into
that
hatred
region.
begetting hatred.
Yes. But that doesn't mean that Mugabe's actions are not at least racially motivated and evil.
Exactly.
So I think it's hard to justify, and there have been killings, in that area based on the people being white, like white farmers who are in that area. But in a place like this, white people are dominant, so therefore there is a slight distinction here because the effects are going to be different of racism. But in a place like Japan, although I don't think there's a lot of virulent racism in Japan, it would be different. A Japanese person would be at the top.
In Japan, they still don't like China. They don't like the Chinese
or the Koreans.
Or the Koreans.
And the Koreans hate the Japanese.
There's so much. It's so much of a melting pot over there of just different hatreds.
Sure. And to us, we look at it and it's like, well, most North Americans admittedly don't know much about Asian cultures, so we're like, it's all same area, but it's not at all.
Mm-hmm.
No, World War II, man.
That reminds me of World War II. Remember the internments? Internments of Japanese Americans?
Camps,
Yeah.
I mean, some of it happened up here, too, a little bit. I mean,
there's one actually in British Columbia. I know there's at least one. There's probably more, but I remember reading about one in that was in British Columbia, and one of the they were forced to live in just these basically houses made out of tin.
Yeah.
And it didn't matter if they were born.
Yeah.
It didn't matter if they were born American or Canadian, whatever. It was because they were of the Japanese persuasion.
Mm-hmm. And we're starting to see that now. I mean, we're starting to hear. I mean, with ISIS happening, we're starting to hear. Muslim families. I've heard the Canadian government asking if they've got any prior affiliations with ISIS and that sort of thing. They have their own list, and this is happening in Canada of all places.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's just a reality. Nowadays, we live in a global world, so any problem is going to be... Now, we're not affected by ISIS in nearly the same way that people are over in Iraq and Syria. And I was very disappointed when I saw people freaking out about, oh my God, they say they're going to kill Canadians. It's like, you're not going to die. Now, if you're altruistically concerned for the people who are over there, or even the Western journalists, although I will point out that that's just a minority of their victims, have at it. These people deserve our help. if we can help them at all. But the fact is, you're not going to be affected by ISIS very directly.
Yeah.
And ISIS knows that as a part of its strategy. It can't. Al-Qaeda was weird as a terrorist organization. ISIS is focusing first on the Rafidi, who are the Shias, and, Al-Salul, I think I might be getting that pronunciation wrong, but supporters of the Saudi monarchy. Those are their two main targets. And after that, they can go with the rest of the world. But some people in that movement think that they're never going to get there because it's in the prophecy. When they try to attack Europe, they'll be fought back, and eventually they'll be quartered in Jerusalem until there's 5,000 of them, and then Jesus will ride in and save the world.
I mean, as a father, I mean, I think the thing that frightens me most about ISIS is their recruitment. They're recruiting.
They're really
recruiting children.
Yeah, they are
recruiting children with these. And I'm very active on the internet. I'm very active on the internet, and I've seen like a lot of their recruitment videos where they just do these horrible things, these monstrous things that you could never even imagine.
Burned a pilot alive.
Burned a man alive.
Buried children. And this is great fodder for cult discussion, because this is like the cult that made it. This cult has turned into a country, and it's far more serious than most other terrorist organizations even that are operating in the name of jihadism. And the thing that fascinates me so much about it is that when you talk to these people, they are not all psychopaths. They are fully functioning human beings.
Now, and that makes it even more frightening.
Because that means that's within all of us in a sense. Not that you and I could become like that, because we're not in a culture that would pressure that. But if we just had a certain personality, a certain predilection, and a certain cultural knob was twisted in a certain way, that activates the us versus them thing. Because morality and compassion evolved for the tribe. It didn't evolve for outside the tribe. People treat other tribes with indifference or hatred, or anything in between, or sometimes an alliance. When they treat other tribes as if they were one of them, it's because they are tricking their minds into thinking that they're all part of the same group of monkeys, essentially.
Right.
And so if we're all part of the same tribe of monkeys, then there's no reason to hate anyone else, because it's all our genes going on, all our genes are linked, and they're supporting each other, and it's all good stuff. And that's the secret to world peace. It may seem that I'm being really reductionistic and kind of, disturbing, but it's not, because we know how to solve it. We solve world problems by convincing us that we're all the same, that we're all the same family, and we're all the same tribe, which we are.
And I actually agree. There's one race, and that's the human race.
Yep.
Well, it's not only an idealistic thing. It's true. If you look at the genes of the human race, we're actually kind of inbred. Like if you look at our genes, we're actually dangerously low on genetic diversity. So it's not even something that you say out of idealism. It's just the way we are. And you look all over the earth, and you see cultures that are totally different. You see cultures, again, as you say, where morality that we would find absolutely barbarous goes on, like pedophilia. Ancient Greece, the Pashtuns and stuff like that, where it's a form of respect and honor to have a boy basically to be your sex slave. But even if these people do things that we consider evil, they have the same human emotions. They have the same empathy for those who are close to them and who love them. They have the same anger when those people are hurt. They have the same desire to become useful and valuable to their tribe. And they have the same sense of love for those who are close to them. And that is absolutely universal in every single part of the world. They might hate other people. We might hate people. But the love that we feel is the same. And if we can get each other to recognize that we all feel love, it's just that we're not directing it towards everyone. We're directing it towards our own, and then we're adding hatred into the mix, and we're taking all of these human emotions, which we all have for good reasons, and we're not applying them very equally, because it's part of our evolution not to apply them equally. But that doesn't mean that we can't. I don't know. I've been on my soapbox there for a little while.
This is incredibly inspiring.
I get it.
This has definitely gone to some good places. I'm glad we have a third wheel, just as intellectual as John here. I mean, I really can't.
And you?
I haven't even. I've let you guys really take the podium. I can't really talk that much with my voice. I mean, damn. Really though, if you really want me to really interject there and put up some really good direction. I mean, we hit a while ago. We hit on the topic of injustice
Yes.
and psychology and
I
injustice.
think I know exactly where you're going with this.
Yeah, and this has to do with cults as well. I mean, look at the case of the West Memphis Three. I know, Zach, you're about as well versed as I am on this.
As soon as I heard about it, I mean, it's just, for those who do not know, this is of course about the case of three boys from West Memphis. What exactly is the town called again?
West Memphis, Arkansas.
West Memphis, Arkansas. There's just these three boys in high school who were accused of the I think it was the rape and torture.
It was
rape, torture, and murder.
It wasn't confirmed rape or any.
Well, that was added on.
There was maybe some sexual just because of the injuries and whatnot, but basically it was the mutilation of these three young boys, beating too. But this was 1993. So
this is.
Were you even a thought? Were you even a thought in your mama's head?
I was not even a thought in my mama's head. And when I first heard about it, those three poor souls were still rotting in prison. When I first heard about it.
Yeah.
I mean, they
got out in 2011.
They only just got out. I mean, one was on death row for so long.
Damien Eccles.
Damien Eccles was on death row for so much of that time, and for a crime that there was no evidence that they ever committed. Their crime was literally, of wearing a black T-shirt and of checking out the wrong book in the library.
Specifically, Damien. He was the one that, he had some depression issues, and there's no doubt he's had some mental problems, and you can't. This goes back to stigma as well.
Well, yeah. As soon as you're in a category, nobody will see you in the same way anymore. Everything is tainted through the lens of you're this kind of person.
Yeah, and that's exactly what happened to him. I mean,
but he was just a heavy metal fan who wore black T-shirts in a town where that wasn't okay.
And he wrote some things that they're pretty dark and questionable. But
what?
They were from the darkness of his own heart.
You're a teenager. Yeah. You're a teenager.
Yeah.
You hate everybody. Everybody goes through that stage.
Ask
when
a
you're
parent,
a teenager.
Or a parent of teenage kids. I'm sure you'll find it out.
Yeah, I'll find that out soon enough.
But that's the thing. It's like people don't recognize that we all have these drives that they fly out of control every once in a while. That doesn't mean that we're crazy. It just means that everybody's got anger in them, and it sometimes gets let out, and sometimes it doesn't. And I think that a pathology is just a normal trait taken to extreme lengths. Like, take a cult leader. That is, in a sense, a corruption of spirituality. Spirituality is a very good thing. But if you go too far, you get dogmatic, narrow-minded, outsider-shunning, controlling, harmful groups. And I think that, the moderation is the thing to strive for. It's like Aristotle said, 3,000 years ago. Aristotle, is that what I said? I think it was kind of
Aristotle.
You said Aristotle.
Yeah. You're good there. You're good.
Yeah.
You're good there.
You're good, you.
Yeah, it's a fear of the unknown. It's a fear of something you're unfamiliar with.
Definitely. And I should note, since we're right there, back in the 90s, the late 80s, early 90s, there was the whole satanic panic thing in the States. I mean, everybody was like, oh, Satanists, oh, God, they're going to cut up our kids. So this definitely ties
poisoning us through the rock music.
That was the same generation that thought that video games made kids violent.
So John, I you weren't as well versed as we are on the West Memphis 3, but I did send you Paradise Lost.
I did the homework last night. No, not last night. Technically, it was this morning. I did that.
And
homework.
the 48 Hours Mystery as well. Did you watch that?
No.
But you read the Wikipedia article.
Yeah, I did.
So really, I want to know, as a first-time viewer, what did you get out of Paradise Lost and reading about the case?
Well, I mean, basically what I get out of that is these kids, whoever they were, whatever they'd done, were, as you said, stigmatized. There was a very narrow, and I mean, looking at pictures of them, they look like, the real-life caricature of Beavis and Butthead, that cartoon from the 90s that mocked and satirized the idea of kids that had fallen away. And I think one interesting thing that I read about that case was, I don't remember the name of it, but it was they settled for yeah, we know that you have enough evidence to convict us, but we're still innocent, and we're still going to
The Alfred plea. They entered the Alfred plea, which is basically, they wanted to get out of jail. Damien was, his health was starting to decline, and he didn't know, when he was going to die or not. So,
I think that was like they thought that it was the lesser of evils to confess to being guilty, even though they weren't. Maybe. I don't know.
If I recall correctly, I mean, actually, would the stepfather of one of those poor boys, rest their souls, who was actually another suspect, a much more likely suspect. But the thing was that he wasn't an outsider. He wasn't a weird teenage. He wasn't a group of weird teenagers who hung around the library reading
He was
occult
an
books.
innocent old family member who was more likely statistically to have done it.
But I mean, the guy had a drinking problem. The guy he had priors.
Yeah.
Yet why wasn't that guy convicted? Again, fear of the unknown.
Which stepdad are you talking about?
The one of the boys who was
Is it Terry Hobbs, or are you talking about John Mark Byers? Was it the one that they really focused on in the first documentary with the redneck, like sort of the crazy redneck?
Yeah,
exactly. And now he's on their bandwagon. He's on the West Memphis Three's bandwagon. At first he hated them, but then as all the other evidence started coming out towards Terry Hobbs. I mean, I don't know if they're ever going to actually get a case against Terry Hobbs. He seems like, just because of all the eyewitness accounts, and all the accounts saying that he was the abusive stepfather and all that, and I don't know. But John Mark Byers ended up on the West Memphis Three side. He publicly apologized, and then they apologized back to him because they put some of the blame on him, But either way, this Alfred plea thing, it's both a blessing for them, but it's kind of a curse because as far as the state of Arkansas is concerned, they've got their guys. They've got their guilty pleas. They just did this to avoid a lawsuit because that was going to happen if their retrial was going to happen and they were acquitted. They would have sued. They would have, made some moolah.
Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, that's what should have happened. That these men these men who wrongfully accused them should be held accountable. They should be definitely held accountable. The judge that handled it should be accountable because where was he? He was on the political path.
Exactly.
He needed this case to go the right way.
There's always a vested interest somewhere. There really is.
And then you have the detective on this, and the guys interviewing Jesse Miss Kelly, who is of course a bit slower. I mean, he had an IQ of about maybe 72 or something. I mean, he's not mentally challenged. They don't count that as mentally challenged
but
anymore.
Very close.
He's functioning.
Yeah.
He's functioning, but he's not mentally handicapped.
No. But IQ of 72, that's very close.
I don't remember if it was 72 or not, but don't quote me. It's in the 70s somewhere.
Right.
It's Forrest Gump, basically.
Sure.
He's functioning. I mean, he knows the world around him, and he knew. He jumped right on doing the Alfred plea because he knew it was in his best interests. It was oh God, the other guy's name, Jesus.
Oh, I'm right there with you, buddy.
Anyway, the third guy. I mean, he really. I'm really embarrassed about this that I forget his name, and I've followed this so much. It's right there on the tip of my tongue. I mean, let's keep talking.
But yeah, I think the main thing that can be learned about those, the main thing that we can say about the West Memphis Three is that is a crime in of itself. That those boys have had the best years of their lives stolen from them. I mean, even like the West, like being a teenager in prison for a crime that they more than likely did not commit.
Yeah.
I mean, there was almost no evidence.
I really think that day 6 people died.
That day 6 people died. Yes. I definitely agree. I agree with that. I mean, and I understand the need to find a scapegoat for a crime that heinous.
Sure.
the death of 3 small children is not something that
It's
that
just
can ever be
it's just
taken
sad. There's that outlying guy that somebody saw going into the Bojangles restaurant. Now they call him Mr. Bojangles. Anyway, he was covered in blood and mud, and they sent somebody to go over there, check it out, and get some samples. What happened to the samples? They lost them, apparently.
Yeah, they lost them.
Like,
With quotation marks.
that was a good lead. That was a good lead. I mean, I don't understand what was going on with that. So that guy's gone forever, whoever the hell he was.
I mean, it's just it also it's just so what's the word I'm looking for? So perfect that it would happen that they just so happen to get this satanic cult of boys right in the middle of the big satanic panic.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I just looked back. It's Jason Baldwin was the
Jason
guy's
Baldwin.
Jason, how do you forget that? I mean, so Damien Eccles, Jason
Yeah,
Baldwin,
I was having thinking when I
and Jesse Miskelly. So Jason was the one. He was the one during the Alfred plea who was like, I can't do this. I mean, my integrity won't let me because I'm truly innocent. It wasn't until he realized, there's 2 other lives at stake, at least. Well, at least one, because Damien was on death row, and also his health is in decline. His eyesight's already been affected by this. Mm-hmm. Anyway, other way. That's when he turned around. I think somebody. I don't know. That doesn't strike me as all 3 of them. It doesn't strike me as guilty people.
No, I mean
They took that leap of faith so that they could leave. They didn't want to admit they were guilty because they're admitting to something that isn't true. The Alfred plea allows them to maintain their innocence. The sad thing is, they may have to take what other further case that they want to pursue to somewhere else.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Exactly, which is truly sad. I mean what also springs to mind. I mean, along with the satanic panic. I mean, around the same time where we were also getting the Judas Priest going to court for those suicides. The double attempted suicide. The Ozzy being sent to court for the lyrics to Suicide Solution.
Yeah.
Which we all know is lament to Bon Scott's death.
It wasn't literally about a suicide.
It was about the effects of alcohol abuse, which I mean,
Yeah.
I wish I could remember. There's this one lawyer who just basically just went around during that time, and he just went around and just made these claims. If you listen to the song, Ozzy's saying suicide backwards using subliminal messaging.
Oh God. Seriously,
'Cause-
sue me
'cause-
over subliminal messaging.
Because Ozzy was so subliminal in his messages.
I don't even know what the fuck you're talking about. What is a subliminal? I don't know. I just wanted to write a nice song about me friend Bon Scott. My Ozzy impression sucks.
That was funny.
I don't know where the fuck I am. Sharon!
That was funny in like a cerebral way to me. It was like, you do a good impression of a crazy coke-addled old English guy.
Maybe not Ozzy, but just the coke-addled.
Yeah.
Maybe they could just start a character by saying it.
Or was he Australian?
London Bridge is falling down, falling down.
I'm not a big Aussie expert or a fan, to be honest with you.
But it's the satanic panic and which
Oh,
I love.
I know
I love
that,
saying
yeah.
that. That's just
Yeah.
those 2 words segue so well, which is probably why. Which I like to think is why it spread so well, because everybody just liked saying satanic panic.
Yeah.
But they went hand in hand with heavy metal. I mean, look at the PMRC hearings. I mean, that Dee Snider absolutely killed. I'm not sure if you're familiar with them. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the PMRC hearings.
It sounds familiar, but I don't think so. Give me
Yeah, you got me. Come on, let's explain.
This is when when Tipper Gore, she wanted to she got all these parents of these other women, part of the were wives of senators and governors, and she made this big group. She made this big group, and they wanted to. This is where we're seeing the start of the parental warning explicit content sticker that we see on CDs and albums today. She wanted to have a warning, and they compiled a list of they call it the Filthy 15 songs that groups such as Madonna, Prince. We saw Madonna,
honey,
Prince.
If you think Madonna's evil, then
Wasp.
you gotta. Oh,
well, for I think it was Like a Virgin was on there,
Oh.
and that's why it was explicit for sexuality and all that. And then Prince, I think for Darling Nikki, I think was the song on there that was deemed too filthy. Granted, you could almost take any Prince song and you could take any connotation from that.
But the way he sings them, it's like the most light, happy thing in the world.
So nice. It's so pretty. It's like he's there speaking to you, or I should say the artist formerly known.
Right. The artist formerly known as Prince.
The love symbol. And then Rat, Motley Crue, they were on that list, and they actually. Dee Snider, along with Dr. Dre and Frank Zappa, who was also on that list, they went to court and tried to battle this. They tried to battle this, and you can find the hearing on YouTube. But the most memorable part was that Dee Snider, that Twisted Sister actually had, I think, 2 songs that were on there. For We're Not Going to Take It and I Wanna Rock.
Yeah,
were both on there. For which are just 2 of the most harmless songs you could possibly listen to. Yeah. So harmless, but so much fun. I mean, and he went in there and he wanted to, in his words, fly the flag for heavy metal. And he came in, and at the start of the hearing, everybody's in their suits, the PMRC people, they were up there and they were in their suits and they're a bunch of middle-aged white folk, and Dee Snider comes in, he's wearing a jean jacket and he's got his makeup on, it's smeared, he looks like he just woke up, his hair's a mess, because 80s hair metal, right? He walks in and he just he lays back on his chair like he just doesn't care, he looks like he's
Good rhyme.
the typical nice rhymes, eh?
Look at the chair like you just don't care. Yeah, man, so venom, man.
Yeah. He comes in, he takes out his speech, it's folded like 17 times. He takes it on the table. He starts flattening it out, and then it's just one of the most eloquent, nicely written speeches ever. And you watch the footage, and the people up there on their pedestal, and they're shifting uncontrollably. They're shifting in their seat. They're completely uncomfortable. And I'm pretty sure they didn't think that he could actually speak proper English. And I don't know if you've ever seen an interview with Dee Snider. That man can definitely speak proper English. Oh. And he sends them through. He failed in getting the sticker removed. He failed in that, but he still was able to create enough of a buzz. And let's be fair though, that sticker probably enlisted a lot of people buying products like, hey man, this says explicit content. I wonder what kind of shit's on here.
Yeah.
Now it's also worth saying though that Frank Zappa, his album after that, it called Jazz in Hell, which had 0 lyrics. He opted to put the sticker on, even though it had no lyrics, just as like a screw you to the group.
Interesting.
I mean, and it's interesting how it goes hand in hand with that, because there were police videos and depicting what to watch out for heavy metal listeners, for their pure scum and evil Brian.
Are you talking about that video of how to identify cult crimes?
Cult crimes. It's all in this exact same park too.
They should have. They should have had a TV show based on those cops. One had a nice mullet and one had a really, really nicely knit sweater. Like, so much character. This is a devil's knot. This is what happens to Satanists when they bind their victims.
I am missing the biggest inside joke here.
The cops back then, they had these instructional videos on how to watch out for cult activity, and the one that we're referencing right now is it starts off and the cops talking about, you know, all this, and they go into a park. And there's like a giant pentagram drawn on the sidewalk, and he says now this is significant of gang affiliation. Likely some homosexual crimes happened here.
Is likely from the 50s?
No, this is from like the early 90s.
Like late 80s and early 90s, something around there.
Yeah.
You can find it on Cracked. You can find it on YouTube. You can
find it on I found it on YouTube.
Wonder we could probably get it up, but there wouldn't be any sound if we're on air, wouldn't there be?
No, wouldn't be.
Shit.
It's perfect. It's definitely a sight to behold.
It is so perfect. I mean,
it's.
I mean, I completely recommend it.
It's like a train wreck.
I completely recommend this. I just want to find out if we can do this. Let's just test it out and see if we can find it.
All right, we'll
find
go
it
on pause for a little while and watch this video.
Oh, we don't need to pause it. We can just go on YouTube. Just YouTube it. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. But I mean, like we'll keep the conversation.
Keep the
flowing.
conversation
going.
going.
I think what we're trying to say though is that we're still every time we say the word cult.
Pentagram?
Oh, look up police training video.
Cults.
That one.
It's the top one. Yes.
Satanic cults.
Okay.
All right.
Holy shit! It's long. It's like.
Oh yeah.
We won't get to
we
all.
won't get there. I mean,
we could do an audio commentary on this video.
Yes, we should definitely do that. That would be great.
Right.
I think for a future episode.
Well, we should skim through some good parts. So yeah, that was a great little curve there.
Well, we'll definitely have to return to that.
We have to return to that.
About this radio equipment, so we might make that fuck up again on purpose, if we want to.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
I mean, okay, but you can get the gist of where that video is going with that music.
It's very
oh, so sinister. We're gonna show you about what happens when there's cults, and we're gonna show you how to deal with it and how to identify it, detectives.
Because it's definitely a sight to behold. I mean,
look at my mullet, man.
It's definitely just perfect. Absolutely. What else? What haven't we talked about yet?
Well, we didn't really dive into Waco much, did we?
No, not much.
That's
not
a classic, really.
That is a classic.
Yeah.
I have a simple knowledge of what went down in Waco.
This will be our longest one yet.
David Koresh was Waco, right?
Yep.
Yes.
The Branch Davidian.
Yeah. Well, I think there's actually a survivor of that who was on a British show called Question Time. Question Time, The Big Question. Sorry, I'm getting confused. But he was actually defending the beliefs of the organization. It's interesting. I've even heard this from ex-Scientologists. There are people who come out of cults, and they believe in some of the stuff that the cult taught still. But they just believe that it's mind control in other ways, and they don't want anything to do with it. So this man had such a control over his followers that even when he's dead, even when there's all of this media, this very negative media all over the world about him, they still think that it's true.
It's frightening. I mean, the amount of devotion a person can have to somebody that even everybody else finds just completely vilifies.
Maybe it's like the romance of I am the last Branch Davidian and the world did not understand me.
Yeah. There's almost a certain romance to it.
But again, like, their beliefs kind of Not to mention their beliefs, but also the fact that they were storing weapons and all that stuff. They were armed.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean,
They'd be considered a terrorist organization.
they were really
right?
they were
Yeah.
really alerted to the fact that they could be extremists, and that's what got the FBI, the ATF involved.
It was because they had their own. I mean, if they'd just been living in the middle of the desert, that would have been different. But they had their own weapons and stuff like that. And obviously, any government is going to, for selfish reasons that they will broadcast as being altruistic, we're really concerned about these people. But I'm not defending David Koresh.
No, of course
I
not.
want to make
Of course
that
not.
clear.
Yeah, I wouldn't defend it either, but I do feel sympathetic that that it didn't need to go down that way. It didn't need to go down the way it did.
I think it was just insecurity on the part of the government that made them respond the way they did. Now, you could have even responded with some military force, but in a way that's intended not to harm. It seemed as if they didn't really care. These people were just like, he saw it as like an anthill that he wanted to squish. The guy or people that ordered it, whoever it was that masterminded the whole thing.
Well, Janet Reno, didn't she give the order?
I
To
think-
tear gas?
yeah,
Janet Reno.
yeah,
to throw
yeah.
the tear
Yeah,
gas? Or-
yeah. I don't understand why, if you're claiming to, getting back to what we were saying earlier, if you're claiming to be good, as cheesy as it sounds, you should try and keep that in mind as your principle. And that'll guide your actions as opposed to rules like, don't do this in this situation, do this in this situation, because those are going to be messy. And there's always going to be a time when it doesn't apply.
I mean, and there does come a time, and I believe they could have, just like what Brian said. Just like what Brian said, it could have went down a much less messy way.
Yeah.
Well, you can see basically nearly all of them died, including children, and Koresh himself.
Yeah.
I mean,
are you familiar with the MOVE organization that was in, I think, Philadelphia in the 80s? Not a whole lot of people have heard about this one, but there was a big a documentary was made about it just recently called Let the Fire Burn, and it was a very fantastic film. And I went into it completely not knowing what this organization. This was an organization that was exactly like this was a cult.
Yeah.
And
cult with a capital C.
The cult with a capital C, definitely. And the organization, they were working under the pretense of as a charity, as a charitable organization, but they were feeding. They had children there. And they were feeding them. Their whole doctrine was to get back to nature. In the middle, this is the middle of Philadelphia, by the way. Getting back to nature in the middle of Philadelphia.
you just don't do that. It just doesn't happen.
It just doesn't work. And they had no plumbing. They had no running water. They had no food. They were forcing children to eat raw meat, uncooked meat there, and they were booted from their one home, and they went to a townhouse along the street where they started stockpiling weapons. The group opponents of the group, they were claiming that we're racist. They were racist because most of the group was African American. And it's easy to fall under the pretense, but when you're feeding children raw meat, and
well, that's just irresponsible, and especially if you don't have a cultural background in it, like the Inuit people do. They know how to serve raw meat. They know how to prepare it. When you're doing it with absolutely no technology and no knowledge, then you're just playing with fire. Kind of like that couple from India in Britain who raised their little child a fruitarium. They only would feed it fruit and nuts, and the kid died at like age of 2 or something, or less than that.
At that age, you have to have a diet. I mean,
it has to be really well balanced.
Oh, you have to have a well balanced diet.
This guy knows he's dead.
Yeah.
He's dead.
You have to.
His shirt has dad on it with barbed wire crossing.
Yeah.
He's a
I'm
metal
hardcore.
dad.
I'm hardcore. I like. Oh well, it's joke, right? I mean, it's joke, right? I mean, but it's it's as a father, it makes it even harder, and it makes it even harder for me to because I understand feeling the I even understand street gangs. I mean, they started because they felt that the cops weren't enough to protect the community, and then it's after the formation of these gangs that they start to deviate into the terrible, horrible, the stuff that they do, the gang banging and the gun shooting and all that. And that's when it starts. And there was definitely that mentality, because then they start stockpiling weapons, and eventually then that's when the police got involved with the MOVE organization.
Yeah.
And they ended up setting fire to the building, and the fire spread, and many of the organization died. And the mayor had the opportunity to order that the fire be left, the fire be dealt with, so that then nobody died. But he didn't. He said, "Let the fire burn."
Oh fuck, that's disturbing.
Yeah.
That makes my skin crawl
With
just hearing
children
those words.
inside. With children inside, no less.
Yeah.
So, this is a case where yes, the cult is they're displaying definitely some deviant behavior, and some behavior that should definitely have been dealt with, that definitely needed to be dealt with. But the police and because they firebombed the roof, and there was wood up there, and I definitely recommend watching it, because there's live footage of the stuff that went down. But the most interesting thing is that this is stuff you won't hear about in any textbook. And why is that?
Well, because they don't want to know that they don't want people to know that they were being oppressive towards this cult.
Exactly.
Now, there's definitely a fine line there. I mean, I bet you the Davidians felt oppressed. Jim Jones certainly felt oppressed by the congressman coming in and trying to get people to defect. Was he doing that for good reasons? Yes, that was a point of false oppression on Jim Jones's opinion. He wasn't being oppressed at all. Like, he was the one doing the wrong. But anyway, here the thing is, with cults, you need to be careful. You need to be careful when you deal with it, good or bad. You have to be careful.
Because they could have members, and
they're designed to go out in a blaze of smoke and glory sometimes. Because you know what, ultimately it's about the idea with cults, or at least for the followers, it's about the idea. And if the leader's gone, especially, or has lost his power, the whole thing goes into a paranoid spiral.
That's
like a dying creature.
Jim Jones.
Yeah.
That really epitomizes him right there.
Like a bear almost.
Once the congressman came in, he was just like, oh, he's taking all my people, they're defecting, and they're going to tell the story, and then the army's going to come and get the rest of their people.
Yeah.
And that probably would have happened. He would have been right. I mean, at that point, but it's really a tragedy what happened there.
I was even understanding that mindset, though, it's so fucked, like, to try and put yourself into like somebody who actually thinks that way. It's like, I need to kill every last one of these people.
And the people that were trying to help.
Yes.
I mean, yeah, a whole bunch of people died on the airstrip just trying to get out of there.
But who is more insane? The person, the insane person, or the people that follow the insane person?
We're getting back to this. What I would say is the amount of harm can be equal. If you were looking for moral blame, obviously the leader is the one to blame. The followers have done bad, but they're manipulated, and they would probably have never, unless they're in the know and they're in it for personal reasons, in which case they can also be condemned.
In the case of Jonestown, really, all those people completely innocent. They were just following this new kind of semi-religious belief, and they wanted to go live off the land, and they felt there was some oppression going on in the States, which there probably was.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, things still weren't right for racial equality and rights and all that. I mean, a lot of those folks were of the black persuasion. Some of them weren't. Some of them were just disillusioned with the government.
Yeah.
And they fled California, went down to Jonestown because this guy is like, "Oh, I'll give you a home." I know, but it all turned out bad, obviously.
Yeah.
Of course. I mean, something like that can't go anywhere other than bad.
That's why some people were wanting to get out.
Uh-huh.
So that's what happened. I guess Jim Jones really just snapped at that point because he saw that his whole world was crumbling.
Mm-hmm.
He might have said he cared about the people. I don't think he did. I don't think deep down he did. He cared about himself.
Very few cult leaders really care. They'd be fascinating to study, like a sincere cult leader. That would be fascinating, but very few of them, I think, are really in it for supposed good reasons.
For money or just the illusion of power.
Yeah, and think about this. Now, the official story, apparently Jim Jones shot himself after everybody took the Kool-Aid. He didn't take it with them. His son believes that's not true. His son believes he had somebody shoot him for him. He couldn't even bring himself to pull the trigger.
He was that cowardly and loathsome. He has almost no self left.
It seems to make sense.
But yet he's clinging to isn't that just a pathetic last state? Clinging to the last shreds of life. Mm-hmm. But what if you've destroyed everything that you ever had in the world, or anything you've ever pretended to stand for?
Another thing that's good to know, which didn't state, a lot of these people didn't really want to die and poison themselves to death because most of them are coming disillusioned with him.
Sure.
I mean, they did practice the suicide pact.
Yeah.
Definitely none of the children wanted to go.
Of course.
Some of them were forced into it. They were injected, grabbed, and had the Kool-Aid shoved in their mouths. A lot of them were complacent, and overall, over 900 people gone. Just like that.
I think that was what really started the whole anti-cult movement, because it wasn't always practiced. I mean, there were new religions that were reviled, like the Mormons. Although Joseph Smith, he took a lot of wives. He had 32 wives or something like that. And, one of them was 14 years old. And it was like, oh, yes, the angel forced me to take all these wives.
Yeah.
I'm sure.
Sure, okay.
And then they had him, he took this old Egyptian papyrus. And the papyrus had these writings on it. And he said, this is the lost book of Abraham, when Abraham was taken in. And, obviously this is bullshit, but, nobody knows it technically then. And then later on, this Egyptian scholar finds a facsimile, which is a fancy word for basically just, an accurate drawing of one of these Egyptian things. And he's like, this is weird, because it looks exactly like a very common Egyptian artifact, but this guy has the wrong head on him, and he's holding a knife. I wonder why that is. And then, later on, out of the Joseph Smith archives, or whatever it is, out comes the original papyrus. And sure enough, exactly where that Egyptologist said that this stuff shouldn't be there, it should be this instead, the stuff that Egyptologist predicted would be there was there. And then, the Egyptologist even predicted what it would be about. And then they read the text on the side, and it wasn't about Abraham at all. It was about what he predicted it would be about. It was about Horus.
It's exactly.
So it's just the guy was a con man, really. But at the same time, is Mormonism a cult? It has cultish aspects to it, but it's I don't know. I think it's a religion. I think it's a religion now because it's become one. It's become something that glues society together. And I think when you look at it in that cynical way, who knows? Jesus might have been a cult leader. Yeah, he had his little group of disciples that wandered around.
I've always said the difference between a cult and a religion is that it's a matter of members. It's a matter of membership.
It's a matter of membership and harm, but I think that the extra membership and the publicity that goes along with it helps take back the harm.
Right.
And you keep the good elements of it and some bad elements, and you get rid of the worst elements. And then it's a religion. Or there's Hinduism, which is just cultural practices. But it's funny that most religions that we have nowadays, they started with one guy like Muhammad or whatever saying, I am the messenger of God. And he gives teachings to people. whether it was the message of God or whether he believed wrongly that it was the message of God or whatever it was, or whether he's like, I think that this is not really real, but I'm just going to give it to these people anyway and, pass it off on them. Whatever happened, it became a religion because it became mainstream and it became accepted. And the fringe elements of all religions fall by the wayside when that happens, because you can't have a functioning society when you practice polygamy in 19th century America. You can't do that. So then the Mormons, for instance, said, we're not going to practice it anymore. And then suddenly things start to change. They get rid of some of the other weird beliefs, or they downplay them. Like Brigham Young, the heir to Joseph Smith, said Adam and God are one and the same. So God makes himself a human and he exists in the Garden of Eden, and then he disobeys himself. It's weird enough as it is, getting to that point is just like, and then and actually that Egyptian papyrus is where all the space aspects, like the beginning of Mormonism, there was no like kolob or any of that stuff.
Uh-huh.
It was, and there was still a traditional Jesus is God impression. It was only later where it was like, actually, and we can all become gods and we're all incarnate from the beginning of time when, we all chose sides. All that weird stuff that people associate with Mormonism, that Mormons downplay right now, all of that came either from Joseph Smith's later writings or the Pearl of Great Price, which has this Book of Abraham in it. Mm-hmm. So it's interesting. That he got crazier as he went on.
It goes back to space stuff.
It's outer space.
In
the 1830s or 40s. You had outer space stuff. Like, what is it about space that these culties love so much?
It's that last part where it's the last place that we can explore.
Yes.
First, we'll go elsewhere. We can think of the Pilgrims.
Yes.
Pilgrims moving over to they got booted out of England, so they move over there. Well, cults nobody wants them. Well, nobody wants them on Earth.
Happy
so they want to go up to space.
Happy Thanksgiving, Pilgrims.
Yeah.
We're gonna go over this way, Pilgrims. Imagine if we had John Wayne.
That really was a cult.
Imagine if we had
It
John.
was a cult. America was founded on a cult of turkey eaters. Cult of evil turkey eaters.
Imagine if there was still pilgrims today. Let's go to Mars, Pilgrims. 2025, Pilgrims.
Going back to Scientology. I think it's interesting. This thought just sprang to mind. I think it's interesting that that so many in Hollywood adhere to the teachings of Scientology. When Scientology gave us that god awful Battlefield Earth.
I thought that would have put the nail in the coffin.
This is what we believe? Seriously?
It's not the fact you guys are a cult. It's the fact that it's based off science fiction.
Make yourself made a shitty ass movie.
L. Ron Hubbard, he's got so many quotes attributed to him where he actually says, "I'd love to start a religion one day. I'd make so much money doing that."
And look what he did. The man lived his dream.
He did. You know what? I almost feel good for him. He was evil, but you know what? He's evil, but he loved it, and he achieved all of this.
Yeah, I love it.
Isn't that horrible that our society encourages us to come to these conclusions about people? Yeah, well, he lived the dream, the American dream. Start your own religion.
Start your own religion.
Oh, ho, ho, follow me, everybody. Ho, hee, ha.
Oh, man.
Follow me, give me your money. Ho, yo, rip
Anyway,
off.
I think that's probably enough for the day.
For cults, we've gone as far as we can go. We've covered all the bases.
All bases. I think.
All the bases.
We could do cults part 2, but not yet. I think we should save that for a much later day.
We've got lots of stuff to talk about.
We've definitely got still ISIS to cover more deeply.
That's its own thing.
That's its own thing.
That's politics as well.
That's its own thing.
Politics.
Especially
don't tell Jesse. Don't tell Jesse.
Don't get me started about politics and Waco and all that. I was going to investigate Waco in season 4 of Conspiracy Theory. That's why they canceled me.
Didn't that happen long before you had your show?
Oh, no. I was going to do Waco. They were like, no, Jesse. They're bad people.
I wonder if being a cult leader is a little like being the governor of Minnesota.
I was voted in fair and square as the governor of Minnesota. I did a good job, I think.
Can't remember much back then.
I don't know. I'm on to bigger things now. Vote for me in 2016 for President of the United States. Maybe.
Well, you've got my vote.
Yeah, well, especially
You're not American.
you'll be the first president since George Washington to have a ponytail. And the first president ever to have a ponytail and be bald. You could beat Donald Trump with that hair.
Beautiful.
I bet Donald Trump's as bald as Jesse Ventura is.
Well, thank you for your service. I really like the compliments.
Do you know what, Jesse? You are a great man. I mean that. You're the only guy I know who could go...
I wouldn't say I'm a great man, but I was a former governor, a Navy SEAL, a fighter. You know, I think I really fought the good fight.
You fought a fight, that's for sure. You fought a fight.
How many confirmed kills?
I don't know. I was a UDT underwater demolitions expert.
Perfect. Beautiful.
That even sounds like a conspiracy thing.
Sounds like...
Yeah.
Actually, they're talking about cult leaders being narcissists. I was reading about narcissists thinking that the world revolves around them. I think I mentioned this earlier on the podcast, and Jesse Ventura thinking that the world revolves around him. You know, conspiracies, they shut me down and all that stuff. And I'm like...
No, I don't think like that. I just try to tell it like it is.
Well, doesn't
Where do you
everybody?
think you're talking about there, Johnny boy?
I'm just saying that maybe you might have something in common with these Waco guys you're investigating.
I didn't get to investigate them. Were you not listening, knucklehead?
Well, I'm not really
I'm
sure.
going to give you a suplex.
Well, what's that?
It's a wrestling move.
I see. Well, that would put you in even worse books than you are in already, so I wouldn't
Bull
recommend
crap.
it. Yeah, you're right. You couldn't get any worse.
You
could
keep
ya?
laughing.
If we actually got Jesse Ventura on this podcast, oh my God, we could have our Jesse Ventura talk with Jesse Ventura.
It's not going to happen. I'm off the grid.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, you're off.
That's
the
I'm
right.
down in
That's
Mexico.
Right. That where you can be safe, express yourself like a true artist. Being a governor of Minnesota is kind of like being an artist, except full of corruption and all.
I didn't do anything corrupt. I gave people their tax money back.
I think that is corrupt in and of itself. I don't think you're
Maybe
supposed to do
to the
that.
big guy. I think about the little man.
Like governors of states, the little guys, you know. Just
I think
ordinary-
about the little man, not the big guy.
Well, I don't think we can reach him any more than he's already been
Don't put
reached.
fucking words in my mouth, buddy.
See, he's beyond our help. Anyway.
Yeah. I guess so. Maybe.
We would like to say goodbye to all of you guys.
2016.
And vote for Jesse Ventura 2016.
You got to get me on the ballot first, so get a grassroots movement going and
We'll
call Alex Jones on